Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Sunday School Review. This time we are now into a new quarter. We're into the summer quarter. And the theme for the summer quarter is the many faces of wisdom. For the next month, we're going to be in the book of Proverbs. And the very first lesson in this quarter is listen to God's wisdom, or listen to the voice of God. And this is taken from the first chapter of Proverbs, verse 1 through 4, verse 7 and 8, verse 10, verse 20 through 22, and lastly, verse 32 and 33. Now, the first verse in the first chapter of Proverbs, that is 1 and 1, it says, the proverb of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Now, this identifies the author of the Proverbs here. And we know that David was the third king of Israel. We have Solomon was the third king. We have Saul, David, and then his son Solomon. And after Solomon, that's when the kingdom was divided. So in the very first verses of this chapter, it's talking about the wise sayings of Solomon. And this is a manual for living. It serves as a guide and a protector. Now, the purpose is stated in verse 2. That is to know wisdom and understanding, to perceive words of understanding, to know wisdom and instruction, and to perceive the words of understanding. Verse 3, to receive the instructions of wisdom, justice, and equity. That is fairness. Now, what we have in Proverbs is a comparison. And the comparison is between the wisdom, that is God's principles, versus folly, or the principles of the world. And we know the scripture says that the wisdom of this world is foolishness or folly as it relates to the wisdom of God. So the wisdom of God is much more superior. And we're going to see in this lesson how if you depend upon the principles of this world, they lead to folly. And for example, let's take an example today. It's going to be discussed later in this lesson when it talks about prosperity. Now, if your hope is on your prosperity, just think about this year. And I do follow the stock market. If you take a look at the stock market for this year, the stock market was at an all-time high in January and part of February. But around March or April, the stock market took a huge nosedive. And the stock market itself probably gave up trillions of dollars in worth. I think it was reported that Warren Buffett lost something like maybe millions of dollars, maybe in a day. But now, don't fret, because Warren Buffett is going to be okay, because he's sitting on billions of dollars of cash. But the point is that if you was relying on the prosperity your money in the bank or in the stock market, then you may be heartbroken. So the prosperity versus the prosperity of the world versus the principles or the wisdom of God, that's the comparison that we see in the book of Proverbs. And in verse 4 of our lesson, it says, to the salty, to the simple, to the young man, knowledge and discretion. Now, verse 5 is not in our lesson, but I want to pick up on it, and you can read it later, but it's not in our lesson. It goes on to say, to the wise man and to the older man. Now, think about this. You're never too old to learn. So we have the knowledge to the wisdom to the young, to the middle age, and to the older person. In other words, we have the wise, and you can become wiser. And this is the notion there. And in our society, we value youth. We don't value age. There are other societies and cultures that do value age. We don't in America. The old, we used to say, but it's not politically correct today, we used to say, yeah, we're going to put them in an old folks home. We don't say that anymore. It's not politically correct. We say the home. So the elderly are not valued. There's a saying, with age, listen carefully, with age should come wisdom. Not all the time it happens, but that's ideally the way it should. We should value age because there's wisdom there. There should be wisdom there. But this proverb, this comparison, this book is for everyone, for the young, for the wise man, a wise person, and for the older, those that are wiser. And that is the first outline, is the introduction. Now, when I said introduction, that's not the entirety of the introduction of Proverbs. The introduction of Proverbs itself goes probably from chapter 1 of Proverbs to chapter 9. And we're just going to be dealing with some verses, selected verses from chapter 1 of the book of Proverbs today. But this lesson today, in the first 9 chapters of Proverbs, is like an orientation. It's like an orientation to Proverbs. And the second outline, that was the first outline. The second outline is introducing wisdom. And we go to verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Now, we also would like to make reference to Proverbs 9 and 10, which says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. Now, I'm a sequential person. In other words, I'm an orderly person. So I go step by step. The first step is to start with God. That's what verse 7 says. So the first step is to start with God. So step 1 is the fear of the Lord. Now let's talk about this fear. Now this fear is not like to be afraid, like to be afraid of a wild animal, like or like God, if you step out of line, God is going to thump you on the head. That's not the type of fear that is referred to here. Now, even if you look up the word fear, it will tell you to reverence God. Okay, well, so what does that mean? It means to honor God, to respect him, and to obey him. That's really what the fear of God is. To respect him, to acknowledge him, to obey him. And we go on into verse 7, says, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Now let me explain what a biblical fool is. A biblical fool is a stubborn person, a person that is unwilling to listen to instructions. And you probably heard the phrase unteachable. They're unteachable. So that's what a biblical fool is, one that is unwilling to listen to instruction. Now, and this is what the Proverbs is saying. You don't want to be like that. You don't want to be like that. You don't want to be that type of a person that refuse to listen to instruction. And verse 8, it says, my son, hear the instructions of a father, forsake not the law of thy mother. Now, this is set up as a student or a student teacher or disciple. The idea is, when we go back to children and parents, as a young child, very young child, they think the parent know everything. They think the parent know everything. But once they get to a certain age, they call that the rebellious years, then the child said, well, I know more than the parent. I know more than you. They think that they know more than the parent. Now, what has happened, they've, maybe found out a little bit of how life works, and they found out that the parent doesn't know everything. But guess what? Neither do they. And the idea is, like I said earlier, is that there's the young, there is the age, there's a wise person, and there's the older person that you can become wiser. We don't know everything. And once the child become an adult, have their own family, the cycle is going to go on. They're going to have children, and then their children are going to think they're going to think that they know more than the parent. But as I said earlier, we're never too old to learn, and with age should come wisdom. And no, we're not going to know everything, but that knowledge plus experience will in most cases give you an advantage. And verse 10, my son, and this is instruction. This is what I said earlier, that a biblical fool is one that is stubborn, that is unwilling to listen to instruction. And verse 8 said, hear the instruction, take heed. Don't be foolish. In other words, what he's saying, don't be foolish. Listen to instruction. Verse 10, my son, if sinners entice you, consent thou not. So in other words, we have many influences in our life. If you sit down and you think about the numbers of contacts you have, you start with the family, on your job, you have co-workers, they may have an influence, and the circle of friends you run with, there's influences, and various social clubs you're members of. So there are many contacts and potential influences you have in your life. And what is saying, or the instruction is, don't be enticed. Now, there are many scriptures in this verse that it's not in our lesson text. But if you read them, what they're saying is, well, let's do this and let's do that, and we can have a good time. But as we look at it, these are worldly principles, and what is that going to lead to? Is it benefiting, or is it supporting the principles of God or the principles of the world? Now it does skip down to verse 20 and 22, where it talks about the outreach. Now in this verse, starting at verse 20, wisdom cries out. Now wisdom here is personified as a female. Now this is wisdom personified as a female. Wisdom cries out, 20 and 21, she utters her voice in the street, cries in the chief place of the concourse, and the opening of the gate. Now, it's just like if someone approach a gathering and they cry out, they yell out. So they're making a plea. So wisdom, as I said, is personified as a she. She's crying out. Basically, she's saying, please hear me. Please hear what I'm trying to tell you. So she's standing up, crying out, please listen to me. Now, in verse 22, how long will you be simple? You simple one. Will you love simplicity? And the scorners delight in their scorning, and the fools hate, reject, or despise knowledge. So what wisdom is saying, she's saying is, stop being foolish. How long are you going to be foolish? How long? That's what wisdom is saying. Now, you don't want to wait until it's too late. Now, and you probably heard people say, well, I wish I would have listened to the person. It's too late now. You in that situation. Yeah, if I had just listened to instruction, I wouldn't be in the situation that I'm in right now. It's too late now. So wisdom is crying out and saying, how long are you going to be foolish? Are you going to wait until it's too late? You already in that situation? I'm not saying you can't get out of it. However, you in it. It would have been better if you had a listened to reason and avoided it. So now it's too late. You in it now, and as I said, well, you got to make the best of it. But it would have been better. It would have been wiser to have listened to reason and completely avoided the situation. So that's what it's saying in 22. How long are you going to do that? How long are you going to sit there and be foolish and ignore instructions and wisdom? Now we jump to verse 32 and 33. And 33, so we are turning away the simple, for the turning away of the simple shall slay them, and the prosperity of the fool shall destroy them. And this is what I was making reference to earlier about relying on the principle of this world, your riches. There's folly, that the folly is there. Like I said, the stock market at the beginning of this year was at an all-time high. And in 2 months, or probably 1 month, lost about $3 trillion of its value. So if you was relying on your prosperity, you would have been in bad shape. Now, like I say, no, you're probably not waiting for a handout. However, that's the fallacy, or the fallacy of relying on your prosperity, because prosperity is false security. And we know, I follow the stock market. It's like the stock market is up, and you say, well, I made X amount of dollars. Technically, no, you haven't until you sell. Or even you say, well, I lost. Well, no, you haven't. It's just a paper loss until you actually sell it. Then you realize the loss, but nevertheless, that could be a false security. When you're relying on the worldly system, that is a false security. And that's what it's talking about when your wealth can fail you. It can be the thing that destroys you. And 33 says, whosoever hearken unto me shall dwell safely. So if you listen to the advice, you can be secure from that. So when you listen, you respond to the wisdom of God. So the idea is that we, when we look at this comparison between the wise and the foolish, is better to be wise, to listen. And there's a parable, that the knowledge, we want to start with God. That's the knowledge base that we want to have. The first thing is the fear, or to obey, to acknowledge, to respect God. That's number one. And the parable in the New Testament is in Matthew, the 7th chapter. It's making a comparison there of the wise and the foolish builder. And we know the story of the parable. The wise builder built his house on a solid foundation, on a rock. Whereas the foolish builder built his house on the sand. And this is what is talking about, going back to the verse 32, the prosperity of fools. Well, I'm gonna rely on my prosperity. I think I mentioned the other week about the man with the barns. He had a good crop. He decided to tear down those barns, build bigger barns, and he figured, I got it made. But the idea is the wisdom of God is much greater than the wisdom of this world. The wisdom of this world is foolishness when you compare it to the wisdom of God. Now, you say, well, yeah, there is worldly wisdom, and there are great things that have been done vis-a-vis worldly wisdom. But the comparison is just so great that there is virtually no comparison. So this is what we want to seek after, the wisdom of God, because that is the wisdom that is going to be sustaining for us. We'd like to thank you for watching this week. Tune in next week for another edition of the Sunday School Review. Thank you.